So we're now open for citizen comment.
Okay to have 3 of us standing
So I guess it's 9, right?
Maybe an extra 30 seconds. Mr. Mayor and council members, we're here tonight as members of the Bennett Hill Progress Neighborhood Task Force to provide some feedback to council and also to request more direct involvement from you in this task force. The task force...
Mark, would you introduce yourselves, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Mark Chewbacca, 817 Montgomery Street.
John Melia, 202 Wilson Ave.
Mike Hudson, 145 Wilson Avenue.
Okay, sorry about that. The task force is attempting to find solutions to some of the persistent and nagging problems that can be identified in a majority of neighborhoods throughout town, not just ours. Our downtown neighborhood has actually been experiencing a recent surge in professionals and families moving in, renting and buying into the neighborhood, probably even a little bit more grad students. I don't obviously have, any exact figures on that, but that's our sense. At the same time, this progress is impeded by the usual problem hotspots, typically rented to students. This is a town-wide problem. The same type of properties crop up all over town, and they're responsible for threatening the quality of life in many neighborhoods across town. So our neighborhood organization has been hammering on these problems probably for about a decade. We picked the low-hanging fruit probably early. So 2 years ago, a task force was started on April 7th, 2005, to address the usual concerns, the drunken behavior, noise, non-responsive landlords, non-effective code enforcement, litter, unkept lawns and hedges, etc. Throughout that year of meeting in that task force, we felt that the planning and engineering department, who was running the task force at the time, constantly tried to steer the focus of the task force away from the number one concern of the citizens, which was code enforcement. And after a year of meetings, the P&E gave a work session presentation to council at the time on March 6, 2006, that a majority of the neighbors in attendance thought was misleading. After that failed effort, we began a new task force with your town manager last September. The goals were very similar, solutions at a cross-functional level. This time we had the attention of the manager to these nagging problems, and also defining processes for obtaining the solutions. We were finding that often solutions were kind of being obtained ad hoc as we went, and there wasn't anything that was defined that could be used in other neighborhoods and whatnot. So we spent the first few months talking to various people, brainstorming solutions in meetings and things like that. When it came time to implement some of these simple solutions that we had come up with and begin defining the processes, we felt that there was resistance and reluctance from your staff to do so, to actually change anything and take any of these meaningful steps. One of the early stated goals of the task force was to brainstorm these solutions and bring them to you perhaps in a work session and let you review and decide on the implementation of those things. In the last meeting that we had in March of 2007, of this year, we brought this point up to your town manager, and he stated that he had no plans to do this and that there were no problems that couldn't be solved through existing ordinances and enforcement practices. Obviously, after 2 years of being in task forces, we strongly feel that the statement is false. In addition to the lack of ability to enforce many of the town ordinances, parking on the grass, trash cans, hedges, over-occupancy, snow removal, illegal driveway expansions, noise across commercial residential property lines, mobile noise violations, just to name a few that are essentially unenforceable or entirely unenforceable. There's a high level of frustration among citizens that we've talked to that virtually none of these ordinances has a defined process for enforcement, much less a published defined process for enforcement. So in addition to this reluctance to enact the changes or define the processes, the town manager's office has ignored repeated requests from any of us to meet or inform them of the status of the task force since March. So silence on the town's part has caused us to question if the town and if council is truly interested in solving these problems, or if we're, just sitting in task forces. So in the last election, two of the most important issues that surfaced were our downtown and neighborhoods issues. They're at the top of many of the lists that I saw. And I feel like this task force is attempting to address both of these things. And based on many of the public statements from many of you, especially those of you that were running in the last election, we feel that this is something that's important to you, and we hope we're right. So we're asking for your leadership in this. I know that the relationship between council and staff is a complicated one, and getting directives and stuff sometimes can be ambiguous, but we're asking for your leadership and your involvement in raising the importance of this, and to keep your staff accountable, not only for effort, but also for effective solutions. We stand here before you today. We spent countless hours over the years working towards solutions in a variety of different ways, and we're willing to spend more. And we know, we don't believe that this is an issue of resources, that we don't have the resources to, we may not have the resources to solve all the problems, but we have the resources to solve many of these problems. And we know the problems aren't easy, but the solutions are out there if there's a will to enact those solutions, and that's what we're asking from you today. So thanks for listening, and as always, thanks for your continued service and your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there any other,
I was just going to ask one question. From the task force and from your neighborhood meetings, have you guys come up with any specific recommendations that you'd like us to consider, whether it would be perhaps more stringent enforcement of current codes or any new codes that you think we need?
Well, I mean, we were working, and I hope continue to be working with your town manager to come up with that. I mean, that's what we thought we were working towards until recently, when we were basically told everything's fine and we don't really need to change anything. So we had come up with some ideas in the task force. I think the most important thing that I would say is that this town does not like to levy. They don't try to take a heavy-handed approach to enforcing anything. And while that sounds good, I think the reality that we're seeing, is that there needs to be a process where the pressure on somebody who's out of, who's not abiding by the code is ratcheted up. And that's especially true when you're dealing with rental properties, because there's a monetary incentive. There's actually because of the money, there's a disincentive really to follow the rules. I mean, occupancy is the biggest one. It's probably the most difficult to enforce, but if you break the rules, you make more money as a landlord, and if you get caught, there's no penalty. And you can go down through much of the code stuff that we're dealing with. There's no penalty for not following the code. So generally, I think that's the direction that we wanted to go, is to see if the town, you can say please, pretty please 3 or 4 or 10 or 30 times if you want, but at some point, there needs to be a next step taken.
And specifically, we're discussing maybe something like cut your grass within 2 weeks might be shortened to cut your grass in 48 hours, or if your garbage pail's out for more than 4 times in any given period, either a fine or the removal of your garbage pail. Even if that resulted in garbage in the front yard, and then we'd have to take it to a different level. But as a neighborhood, we were do have isolated instances where people just don't want to comply when asked, and feel that we do need to have some kind of mechanism where those people that have those kinds of problems do need, let's say, bigger stick.
Do these, the problems, I'm presuming, typically occur and consistently in the same properties?
Of course, yes.
Almost always rental properties. It's we have at least 2 wheelchair-bound residents in our neighborhood that I've spoken with that have that complain because our trash day is Thursday, and David Darnell doesn't patrol for trash cans till Monday. And then there's no mechanism again for enforcement or penalty behind leaving your trash can obstructing the sidewalk all weekend on Progress Street. There's no good mechanism for getting NERV to cut their grass. Right now, it's 24 inches high. I personally made a complaint to David Darnell, and the process as it exists now takes a month, at least a month, from citizen complaint to the time that a contractor might show up to do it. And that's after we've waited for it to reach 10 inches. These are the things in the codes that David Darnell is enforcing are the absolute minimum standards. What we'd like to do is to enact some ordinances with the strength behind them to create a culture of accountability to landlords that don't live here in town but profit from being able to rent properties in our neighborhood.
Maybe we could take this up at our retreat this summer,
Well,
one of our items.
Yeah, I think we'll go into unfinished business. Let's talk about it a little bit.
Okay. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hope we can go over 9.
We're still open for citizen comments. Anybody? I'm going to go ahead and close citizen comments. And Mark, I'm going to ask you if you would just respond to that because there's some questions and what you were doing. So I'm going to go outside of the ordinary here.
Count one thing Mr. Shabaka said, that I said that there aren't things that we can do. I don't remember ever making that statement in that meeting. And I think our staff... No, just, it was the thing.
Well, let's not, we're not going to, he didn't interrupt you. Let Mark speak, please.
Making a statement that there weren't ordinances that we can pass or that there weren't things that we can do better. I think the whole process of meeting with this group has been to try to look at things we can do better. And in a lot of ways, I think we did make a lot of progress, and we're certainly not done. There were a lot of things implemented by the police department in that neighborhood since January. We've established a zero tolerance policy. We're doing a lot of different things with enforcement, whether it's noise complaints, parties. We've been documenting our processes to meet with the folks from the group to talk about how we do code enforcement. Unfortunately, what's happened over the last 3 to 4 months, we've had several major issues occur in the town. And we've had high levels of the organization meeting with these folks. We've had the manager's office, myself, Steve Ross, we've had the town attorney, we've had the police chief working with them. Unfortunately, over the past 3 months or so, we've had several major issues hit the town, and this has fallen lower on the priority list, and I apologize for that. We had the events of April 16th, of course, and then we've been distracted with all the ordinance 1450 and the lawsuits and all those things that have been happening. So we've been spending a lot of time on that. We haven't had the time to do a lot of the background work that it's taken to address some of the concerns that we've been working with on this neighborhood. That said, I think the fellows that spoke would admit that we have made progress, some short-term progress on some low-hanging fruit. But there are some very complex issues in that neighborhood. Pretty much any code enforcement type of issue that you can find in the town code, you'll almost find an example of it in that neighborhood. You know, whether it's a weeds, trash, parties, and it's occupancy, and they're all. A lot of them are very difficult to enforce. And we've been working with the town attorney's office to look at ways we can maybe strengthen some of our enforcement measures and look at some potential changes in the way we do things. But it's not going to happen overnight. But I do want to express that we have been working with the neighbors. It is a priority. I mean, I'm spending my time on it, Steve's spending his time on it, the town attorney's spending his time on it to try to solve some of these issues. And we plan on continuing to work with them into the future.
I just want to say one thing, if I may. I know that both Mark, Steve, and Larry have been working very hard with this group, and I think Mark pointed out that April 16th has happened in the last 2-3 months, and Ordinance 1450 and the other issues. And I think that you have been very involved, more involved than any manager, I think, in the past dealing with neighborhood issues, and this neighborhood issue in particular. So I think that needs to be pointed out, and you need to be commended for the effort and the time all of you all have put into it. We have talked about some other things, getting the town attorney on. Tom, I talked with you and Don about maybe some issues with the town attorney. Maybe we can revisit that and go back and look at that, because I don't know if you all have ever had a chance to meet with him. And then what I would suggest that we do, rather than the work session, because I think we're trying to, the retreat, what we're trying to focus on with the retreat coming up in August is kind of the interaction of where we see our vision going as a town, rather than just specifics. I think it's what I've really been looking at, and we've talking with Mark, and if we get a facilitator, more of a broad vision. What I've said before is that we as a council need to start thinking about what we're for and work towards those positive means. And certainly one of the things that we're for is to improve everybody's neighborhood, including your all's. But I would suggest that we find a time at a work session to go over everything that's been done, and then maybe get a response as to some other things that could be done, and we talk about that and do that in the next couple months.
And we can do that, and we can look at things, we can look at issues that have been raised, we can look at responses we've already made to those issues, and we can look at, is council willing to take a harder stance on some of these things? Because when we take a harder stance on some of these things, we're going to solve some problems, but we're also going to create some complaints from some citizens too. So it gets very tricky. Code enforcement is a very tricky area. And there's certain state codes you have to follow, there's certain due process rules you have to follow in order to do the enforcement.
And it's something we might want to look at before, we might not do it before the exact start of school, but as close as we can to the start of school before things really get revved up.
Right.
And then see what else we do. Because again, I want to say, I know you have been working very hard, and I know the neighborhood has been working very hard. So we need to continue that.
Ron, would it be a good idea to have a group of council, a committee of council, meet with Mark and the neighbors?
I know that Don, I think you've met with that neighborhood some of that time. You've been very involved in that neighborhood over the years. Perhaps kind of like we talked about last fall, is y'all get together and get with Larry and see if there are other things that would be brought before council. I think that would be a good thing, because I know that a lot of times when something comes up, Tom, I know that you initiate getting with the neighbors to get them involved with it and to bring them in. And I think, we've all been very proactive. I think you two have worked hard on that. So I think we can continue that vein, because there has been council involvement in that neighborhood. And I think just go back to what we had talked about earlier is maybe getting with Larry and his free time, his spare time with all that he has right now.
Yeah, I think it would help if the task force would perhaps propose to us specific recommendations for stricter, in the area of stricter enforcement that would be legally feasible for us to consider. And you brought up some of those issues, but to give us specifics to consider, and that our town attorney could review and say the state will allow you to do this, the state won't allow you to do that, and then put it on our desks and perhaps at a work session, and we can consider whether we want to take those steps at more stringent enforcement.
We were starting to get to that point. I think where we ended up, we were having different discussions every meeting and getting into some different issues. And we took some steps of some of the low-hanging fruit that we could take care of right away, and then we started running into more complex issues that require potential code changes, that require things that may be impacted by state code that are more challenging. And then we got to that point, and then we also hit the workload from all these other issues that came up, and it's been a good 3 months or so since we've met. So that's kind of what happened.
All right. So council's happy with that? All right.
The only thing I would add is if we look at specific ordinances, I think we need to look at financial impact too, because enforcement costs money. Enforcement in the next level, going to court, costs money, that sort of thing too. So obviously it's not just don't just send out another notice.
We put more enforcement resources into that neighborhood than anywhere else in town. We really do already. And that's not to say that we don't need to do more. We don't need to look at changes and try to be more effective at what we're doing, but we're putting a lot of effort in there.
And I know that just from talking to the manager, this is something that he has been thinking about and is constantly thinking of different ideas and ways to meet some of those challenges. So it hasn't been ignored. So I won't let you know that. Okay, any other discussion on that unfinished business? We are in unfinished business, even though we segued into it without saying it. One thing I did want to bring up is I just wanted to point out is that Blacksburg Transit received the VTA award, which is is that with the Virginia Transit Association? What does VTA stand for?
Virginia Transit Association.
Good. That was easy. Yeah, sometimes you can hit on the nail. But it was given on Wednesday, May 13th, in Blacksburg Transit. They were outside of Charlottesville, I believe. And it was for their efforts during the tragic events of April 16th. Talking about how transit stepped forward, the bus drivers, all of transit stepped forward and went above and beyond the call of duty. Let me just read some of the things here that led to the award or that were cited. During the crucial hours between 10 a.m. and 9 p.m., Blacksburg Transit provided the following support services. Established contact with both the Medical Command Center and the Police Tactical Command Center. Established and maintained transit supervisory posts at various locations on campus. They set up a command post at Blacksburg Transit's office. They transported an injured student from the area to a local hospital in a bus route. They stayed there and helped evacuate, and this is always think that this is just so amazing and should be commended. They stayed there and they helped evacuate thousands of people off campus. I think Councilman Sherman talked about a picture right after April 16th of two officers running towards danger, and we were looking at their backs, where if it had been one of us, we'd be looking at our fronts, running away from danger. Well, the transit drivers did the same thing. They stayed there on campus, and they made sure that people could get off of campus that needed to, and help in that orderly evacuation. Revised bus routes for most buses mobilized, and 2 shifts of relief operators for additional evacuations. Provided vehicles for police tactical teams, and established and maintained direct communications with both the town of Blacksburg and Virginia Tech officials. Just another way that all our agencies with the town work closely with Virginia Tech to help them in this horrible situation. So I wanted to point that out. Do we have any more unfinished business? I guess I have one other item that is, see, y'all need to look to me, I'm kind of taking over from other people.
That's why you're mayor.
We also, Citizen tonight, Charlie Rose brought us some pictures of Westview Cemetery and some of the plantings and some of the things that have died. He's given us a couple copies. I know the town manager and the deputy town manager and I were out there about 2 weeks ago to look at things and realize, and so for everybody who is interested in Westview and what's going on, what's happening with those trees is not being ignored, and that we will continue to work to make sure that it's addressed in a fair and equitable way, and we get some live trees out there, because dead trees just don't work.
You know that issue, right?
Mr. Mayor, that does remind me of a semi-related issue. I know we've had some cones growing in downtown Roanoke, and I know, I just want to mention the staff is working on figuring out a replacement for the trees that have been removed, so people who are seeing the orange cones shouldn't be seeing them for too much longer, I hope.
So we're going to have a way then of, when trees come out, we don't, orange cones don't spread.
It's a specific species of tree that only a handful of nurseries grow. So number one is getting the tree and then planting it at the right time so it'll survive, unlike the ones in the cemetery.
Yeah.
So that's why when you see a tree disappear downtown, it takes a little bit of time to get it. Now with the tree nursery that Dean and the Parks and Rec Department planted, that'll give us an opportunity to keep a supply of trees here so we can take care of some of those issues of trying to get them ordered.
Mary and I firsthand how that's going to work with their little shovels. She did a great job.
But the trees have had a tough time downtown.
Yeah, they really have throughout the different.
For a few years.
But one of the things I always make sure is when they get broken off and they're sticking up like a spike, we just want to make sure that's cut off so we don't impale.
Walked downtown a week ago yesterday and looked at all the different trees and some of the different issues that are downtown. And he's going to work with his staff to come up with an alternative to the cones, because it does take a while to get the trees replaced. And come up with something that takes away the cones, throws in that hole somehow on a temporary basis, so you don't have that view. Try to clean up that stretch a little bit.
Thank you.
That'd be nice.
Any other unfinished business? And I do not have any more myself. New business? Then we will go downstairs, I won't say retire downstairs, but go downstairs to have a work session dealing with annual boards and commission appointments.
And Mayor, would you like to note that council's not expected to take any action on that tonight?
What do we do with that, Chief? Today, Donna said, no, don't forget, I won't forget to do it. I said, Donna, if I forget, please feel free. So, yes, we won't take any action on these appointments until July 10th.
Right.
Thank you.